Hello, John and Sil. Brian told me you guys had focaccia on the menu, and I have had a great focaccia recipe for years. I've been making this shit so much for so long. I heard some feedback that you thought it was a little bit complicated, and that's just because I'm a horrible communicator, and those recipes are pretty much all those recipes I've written have been when I've been hammered, and every time I edit it over the years, I'm also hammered. So I'm going to break this down for you in a way that is super easy. So this is part one, where you see the first part of the recipe where it says the Poolish, also known as a Biga or a pre-ferment. Typically I use my sourdough starter here as the leavening agent, but I didn't plan on making this video tonight, so it's been in the fridge, it's not that active, so we're not going to use that. But normally, this shit is awesome because it's like a nice sour tang. It's naturally leavened. The bread actually lasts longer when this is used as a leavening agent. But I will show you the first part, the Biga, that needs to be done the day before. So let's get started, shall we? All right. Can you see everything here? All right. First things first, 227 grams of flour, I believe. You should really get a scale for this kind of shit. I mean, it's super cheap. It'll come in handy for, a lot of different, actually I have to put them down. But you should get a scale just because it's useful to have, it's cheap. And when it comes to measuring like flour and dry ingredients like that, let's say this were like a measuring cup, because flour is so kind of loose. Let's say this was like a leveled cup, and then I did it again. I said this is another level cup. The difference between that first spoon and that second spoon can be drastically different, just because everyone packs flour differently. It's just there's way too many variables when it comes to measuring those kind of loose and dry ingredients. So that's why I always use a scale for flour and my sourdough starter and things like that, just because baking is definitely more of a precise thing than cooking, where you can just kind of fucking, work on the fly, figure things out as it happens. But anyway, equal parts flour and water, 227 grams of all-purpose flour. You don't want to use bread flour because you kind of want a lower protein content to kind of make it a little more tender. Between the all-purpose flour and the olive oil, it really creates a much more tender dough, and it's just more desirable in focaccia. So let's measure out 227 grams of all-purpose flour. King Arthur, the best fucking flour in the game. You can get those fancy-ass flours for $15-20, but fuck that shit. This is the way to go. It gives you that exact protein content, and they have very strict regulations on what they actually send out. So when he says 11.7% protein, you know exactly what you're getting. And it does make a difference. I won't go into that now. If you guys want a sidebar, I could talk about that shit for hours. Anywho, measuring the flour. And this pre-ferment, so the longer things ferment, the more flavor they develop. That's why I like the prize breads, like the French campagne bread, baguettes, like New York pizza dough. It's all proofed over a very long period of time. And this is going to be kind of the base layer, because this is going to ferment overnight, develop a lot of flavor. And then this is going to go into the rest of the main dough tomorrow when we actually start to put the dough together and knead it and shape it and ultimately bake it. And look at that, I'm a little over. I'm at 239 right now. And try to get it right. Try to get it right on the money. Because it's amazing how little variation in hydration percentage can really change the outcome of just the dough. I mean, going from a 73% hydration bread to a 75% hydration bread it's kind of funny how different it is. All right. 227 grams of flour. Should have had my water prepared for this movie. I'm sorry, or this video. I'm sorry. So for water or liquids in general, you don't need a scale because 1 gram of water equals 1 milliliter of water. So you know that if you need to measure 228 grams of water, you could just use a volumetric measuring cylinder to measure out 228 milliliters. Mine is dirty and full of syrup for my old fashioned, so I am just gonna wait anyway. So so typically I would recommend people using like filtered water for this, but the New York City tap water is pretty fucking good, so it's good enough for me, really. Remember, no like olive oil or salts going in right now because this is just giving a chance for the water to fully hydrate the flour, and it's just like a little bit of yeast, so it really gets like that fermentation kick going. And like the difference of starting a bread today to be made tomorrow versus a bread that you're making tomorrow to be served tomorrow, it's just got, man, there's no comparison. Those longer ferment times are just best you can ask for. And then so, since we're not going to be using sourdough starter, I'm sure I know you don't have one. We're going to use about like a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast, just a very little amount. Yeast is like, honestly, you can use as little or as much as you want because yeast in general is a very like self-regulating thing. Like you really can't put too much in because like they're fighting for the same food supply. And if you put too little in, then they're just going to keep on eating, which I think is the beautiful thing about this kind of yeast. Just looking for a gram here, which is about a 1/4 teaspoon. A little too much. Yeah, it doesn't fucking matter. Self-regulating, right? All right, so let's see. Done with that. So all we have here is water, flour, and yeast. And this is basically just what's going to kickstart that fermentation process. And then when we add this into the final rest of the dough tomorrow, it's going to add a lot of extra just depth of flavor and tang, and like kind of like I said, like longer fermentations always lead for a better flavor. And like this, like notice that you don't add any salt right here because salt is actually a pretty big inhibitor of yeast growth. So we're not going to add we are going to add another batch of yeast in, but not till tomorrow once we make the final dough tomorrow, because by the time this is all, done its magic in here, it's not going to have, as powerful as act as powerful as a leavener as it will when it's kind of added in fresh. So 227 grams of water, 227 grams of all-purpose flour, and we're just gonna mix this shit up. Really want to be, always wear an apron, especially when you're wearing all black and working with flour. That looks a tad bit dry. Don't deviate from my, recipe unless like you really know what you're doing. it'll be fine. This is just a slight tweak. So you want to beat all the lumps out. And this is kind of what it should look like when you're done. So all you do from here is cover it in plastic, leave it out at room temperature. Or even what you could do too is if you wanted to do this like maybe a couple, 3 days ahead of time, the more you let this wait, the more like good bacteria is going to build up, the more like kind of tang it's going to get to it, which isn't a bad thing at all. But I think just the overnight pre-ferment is totally fine for this focaccia. We're not looking for like a true sourdough, so this will be just fine. So all you do from here is you cover it. I like to throw like some cling wrap around it and then cover it with a towel just so light doesn't get in. And then whenever I wake up in the morning, I'll start making another video on how to do the rest of the dough. This is all the easy part. The tough part comes when it comes to you've actually got all the dough together, you know, you've kneaded it out, and you're resting it, folding it between rests, final proofing, shaping. That's where it gets complicated. So tomorrow I will send a video on like how it looks when I'm doing that shit. So I hope you've taken some knowledge from this video and hopefully some expertise, and I look forward to seeing the pictures of your focaccia. Cheers. See you tomorrow.